Z and I met and fell in love when we were both still very, very young. I think it was in 1994 when we met. We both were still in high school, and I ended up getting pregnant. I gave birth 2 weeks out of high school. Things were still going good though. We were still connected in church, and Zenas was working, supporting for us. We were living with my grandparents, and things were going good. Maybe a few years down the line, I think ZJ was now 6 years old. He started working. He took a job as security for the Marriott in Waikiki. He had the overnight shift. So I guess I never knew, but for a whole year he was doing drugs to stay up at work. I never suspected anything. I didn't think anything of it. He would go to work, come home, sleep. And then I guess a year after he was already hooked, I guess, I found out that he was doing drugs. And soon after that, I remember he lost his job, and then he started doing drugs just for recreational purposes. He just started smoking just to smoke. And after I found out, I guess he didn't have to hide it anymore, so he just started doing it openly. He would leave, and then one day he didn't come back. One day turned into 2 days. 2 days turned into a week. And then it came to a point where I didn't know when he was gonna come home. By then, we had Zoe. We had Zoe already. Zoe was still a baby. Zenas was hanging out at drug houses and not working. At this point, he wasn't working at all. He was just doing drugs full time, and I was working, trying to support our family and just trying to keep things afloat. Things got really, really bad, and I ended up moving out. I took my kids, and I was staying with my aunt, and he turned our house into a drug house. I remember going back and forth from that house to my aunt's house, and then finally to where we got evicted out of that place.
When I started smoking ice in my addiction, I found myself just in Chinatown. I picked up another bad habit. I was gambling, and I went to town to make money for my family, but ended up getting stuck there in town in the game rooms. And like everything I just made, I would lose in the machines, and it was like all for nothing. I'll be gone for days, and only time I would like see them is like when I'll show up at church where they're at.
I remember waking up and not having money, but I would just look for coins enough to catch my bus with my kids to town. And I would go there like 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd catch my bus. I'd get there around 9:30. And then, I didn't have any money, so we would be walking around. I'd probably take my kids to the park. And in between, I would go to the game rooms and ask around if anybody saw my husband. And of course, most of the time, they're all hiding him. They would tell me no. The hours would go by. We didn't eat all day long. And I remember it being almost midnight. My kids all tired. And I was all frustrated. I couldn't find him. I knew somebody must have told him that we were looking for him. But I just remember walking around downtown, almost midnight, thinking I didn't have anywhere to turn to. I remember running into strangers. I didn't even know them, and I'd be like asking them because I knew they knew my husband, and I would just be like, can you just give me some bus money so me and my kids can get home? And then finally I just got to a point where I was just tired of it. And Zenas ended up getting arrested. He went to jail.
I remember being in town one day, and I was doing transactions, and I remember being on River Street, and I remember just this dude just pulled up, and I got in his car, and he was like, "Oh, yeah, just give me a 40." And I was like, "What?" I never saw this dude before, and like, I was asked him, "Where are you from?" He go, "Oh, why not?" You know, whatever. Then I just made a transaction with him, and I jumped out of the car, and not even like a minute later, a van pulled up with and then 5 guys jumped out, all dressed up in SWATs, with guns pointed at me, had me to the ground. And all I can remember was telling them is, "Hey, I didn't do nothing. I didn't do nothing." I remember they just shoved me on the ground and just handcuffed me and took me in.
We used to go visit him, and I remember visiting him one time, going in there, and one of the guards stopped me and was like, she asked me if I was here to see Z by Menino, and I was like, "Yeah, I am." And then she was like, "Oh, could you let him know that his wife is locked up on the women's side, and that she's pregnant?" And so I was thinking to myself, that was kind of weird, because I'm his wife, you know? I was wondering, like, who is that? So she told me the name, and then when I went in, I confronted him about it, and he denied it, of course. And then from there, I just decided that I was gonna leave. Me and my kids, I paid our fare, and we went to Washington. Zenas ended up spending about 6 months in jail, I remember. And when he got out, he was doing better, so we had decided to move back. He got off of probation, and then next thing I knew, he was going right back to town, right back to the game rooms, right back to the same old lifestyle that he was living. And I just got fed up, and I told him, I didn't come back here to go through that again. And I was really planning on leaving him. I was just like, I'm done, I'm over. During that time, I remember talking to him about going to a new church. At that time, we were at his family's church, and he wasn't changing. He wasn't doing anything or even trying to change. And then I remember Victory Outreach, because we used to visit before years ago. And I just told him, let's just go and try it out. So we went. I called up my friend Solita and asked her where the services were. And then we came one Sunday, and we liked the services. Zenas he was warming up, and he liked the idea that there were a lot of ex-drug users and ex-gang members and people just like him here in the church serving the Lord. And I remember Pastor Tony had invited us. Zenas was still smoking at this time. He was still doing drugs, but I remember Pastor Tony inviting us to a Bible study. And when we went, I remember Zenas was high at the time at that Bible study. And Pastor Tony had spoke about returning to your vomit. And after that Bible study, I just remember my husband feeling convicted and talking about how the message really spoke to him, and it really opened his eyes. And after that Bible study, he never did drugs again. Like, that was the last time he ever smoked, the last time he ever left and been gone for days. And since then, his life has changed for the better, and he's serving God now. He's on the worship team, and we're all here serving the Lord together as a family. I just thank God for the change. And 10 years ago, I never would have thought that he would be here today. Like, I really thought that my life was gonna end somehow with me being unhappy and possibly killing him, or who knows. Shaden is my son. He was introduced to us about 2 years ago. He's not my biological son, however, I treat him as if he's my own, and I thank God that He brought him into my life at a time where my heart was ready and willing and ready to accept the situation and take him in as my own. And I love him with all my heart. And you know, my family of 4 instantly became a family of 5. This could have broke us up, but thanks to God and His and everyone's prayers, you know, we're a family that's restored and still going strong.